Before we begin, welcome to Book Bite, the place where powerful books become life-changing ideas. Today, I want to ask you a simple question. If someone gave you a sword, would that make you a warrior? Probably not, because anyone can hold a weapon, but very few people can master themselves. Part 1. What is Bushido? When most people hear the word samurai, they imagine fearless warriors, deadly swords, epic battles, and legends from ancient Japan. But here's something surprising. The samurai weren't remembered because they knew how to fight. They were remembered because they knew how to live. Behind every legendary warrior, there was an invisible code, a code more powerful than the sword itself, a code called Bushido, the way of the warrior. But don't let the name fool you. Bushido isn't really about war. It's about character. It's about becoming the kind of person who does the right thing even when no one is watching, who remains calm when everyone else is panicking, who keeps their word even when breaking it would be easier, who chooses honor over comfort. Centuries ago, a samurai understood something we've almost forgotten. Life's greatest battles are rarely fought against other people. They're fought within ourselves. The battle between discipline and distraction, between courage and fear, between honesty and convenience, between humility and ego. And perhaps those battles are even more relevant today, because modern life gives us endless opportunities to compromise who we are. Every day, we're tempted to take shortcuts, to chase approval, to compare ourselves with others, to sacrifice our values for temporary success. Bushido asks a different question. Not how successful are you, but what kind of person are you becoming? Because success can disappear, money can disappear, fame can disappear, but character stays with you for life. In this book, author Inazo Nitobe introduces 7 timeless virtues that shaped the lives of the samurai, not to create perfect warriors, but to create honorable human beings. Justice, courage, compassion, respect, honesty, honor, and loyalty. Together, these virtues formed something far greater than a philosophy. They became a way of living, a way of making decisions, a way of facing challenges, a way of earning trust, and perhaps a way of building a meaningful life. The remarkable thing is, even though Bushido was written centuries ago, its lessons feel surprisingly modern, because while our world has changed, human nature hasn't. We still struggle with fear. We still battle temptation. We still search for purpose. We still wonder how to live a life we're proud of. And maybe that's why this ancient code continues to inspire people across the world. Not because we want to become samurai, but because we want to become stronger, kinder, more disciplined, and more honorable versions of ourselves. Over the next few chapters, we'll explore each of these virtues one by one, not as history lessons, but as practical principles that can quietly transform the way we think, the way we act, and ultimately, the way we live. And everything begins with the very first virtue, the foundation upon which every other virtue stands. Rectitude, the courage to choose what is right, even when it's the hardest choice you'll ever make. So, if Bushido is built on 7 virtues, why does it begin with rectitude? Because without it, every other virtue loses its meaning. Imagine a person who is courageous but uses that courage for the wrong reasons, or someone who is loyal to an unjust cause, or someone who is disciplined but driven by greed. Strength without direction can become dangerous. That's why the samurai believed before you learn how to fight, you must first learn how to choose. Rectitude simply means this: doing what is right, not what is easy, not what is profitable, not what is popular, but what your conscience knows is right. At first, that sounds simple, until life puts you to the test. Imagine you're at work. A small lie could save you from trouble. No one would ever find out. Would you tell the truth? Or imagine you see someone being treated unfairly. Speaking up might make you unpopular. Would you stay silent or stand for what's right? These moments rarely feel heroic. No one applauds, no dramatic music plays. But according to Bushido, these quiet decisions shape your character far more than life's biggest moments ever will. The samurai understood something that many of us forget. Every choice is building the person you'll become tomorrow. Every honest decision makes honesty a little easier. Every compromise makes the next compromise easier too. Character isn't built overnight. It's built one decision at a time, one ordinary moment at a time. Today, the world often asks us one question: what's in it for me? Bushido asks a completely different one: is it the right thing to do? Because success earned without integrity never feels complete. You may impress other people, but deep down, you always know whether you betrayed your own values. And perhaps that's the greatest punishment of all: not being judged by the world, but being unable to respect yourself. The beautiful thing about rectitude is that it doesn't require perfection. No one always makes the right decision, not even the samurai. What mattered was having the courage to return to the right path again and again. Every new day, every new choice, every new opportunity. Because integrity isn't something you're born with, it's something you practice. Think of it like a compass. A compass doesn't remove the storm. It simply reminds you which direction is true north. Rectitude works the same way. Life will tempt you. Fear will test you. Comfort will call your name. But your principles will always know the way. And maybe that's what real strength has always been. Not the strength to defeat another person, but the strength to never betray your own conscience. Because once you know what is right, life asks an even harder question: will you still do it when you're afraid? And that's where the second virtue of Bushido begins: courage. So, knowing what is right is only the first step. The real question is, will you still choose it when fear stands in your way? Most people think courage means not being afraid, but the samurai saw courage very differently. To them, fear wasn't the enemy. Allowing fear to control your decisions was. Think about your own life. How many opportunities have you delayed because you were waiting to feel ready? Maybe you've wanted to start something new, apply for your dream job, speak up in a meeting, tell someone how you truly feel, or simply take the first step toward a better life. But then, that familiar voice appears. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if people judge me? And suddenly, doing nothing feels safer than trying. The strange thing about fear is that it often disguises itself as patience. It tells us, wait until you're more confident. Wait until the timing is perfect. Wait until you're certain. But life rarely works that way. Confidence doesn't usually come before action. It grows because of action. Imagine a child learning to ride a bicycle. They don't begin with confidence, they begin with uncertainty. They wobble, they fall, they get back up. And little by little, what once felt impossible becomes natural. The samurai believed life worked the same way. Courage wasn't about never falling, it was about refusing to stay on the ground. And perhaps the greatest acts of courage don't happen on battlefields. They happen in ordinary moments. The courage to admit, I was wrong. The courage to leave a life that no longer makes you happy. The courage to defend someone who cannot defend themselves. The courage to remain honest when lying would be easier. These moments may seem small, but according to Bushido, they reveal the true strength of a person. Because courage isn't measured by how loudly you speak, it's measured by what you do when no one is watching. The samurai understood something timeless. Every time you let fear make your decisions, your world becomes a little smaller. But every time you act despite fear, your world grows, not because fear disappears, but because you become stronger than it. Maybe courage isn't the absence of fear. Maybe it's the decision that something else matters more than embarrassment, more than failure, more than rejection. Because at the end of life, we rarely regret the things we tried. We regret the opportunities fear convinced us to ignore. Bushido reminds us that bravery isn't about taking reckless risks. It's about taking the right step even when your heart is uncertain. Because once you have the courage to act, another question begins to matter. How will you use your strength? Will you use it to dominate others or to protect them? The samurai believed that true power was never meant to inspire fear, it was meant to inspire safety. And that brings us to the next virtue, benevolence, the quiet strength of compassion. So, if courage gives you strength, one question still remains. What will you do with it? Will you use your strength to control others or to protect them? The samurai believed this was one of the greatest tests of character, because anyone can become powerful, but not everyone knows how to use that power wisely. That's why Bushido places such great importance on benevolence, the virtue of compassion. At first, that might sound surprising. After all, when we think of samurai, we think of warriors, armor, swords, battlefields, not kindness. But that's exactly what made Bushido different. The samurai believed the stronger you become, the kinder you should become, because strength without compassion eventually becomes cruelty. Think about the people you've admired most. Were they simply powerful, or did they make you feel safe? Perhaps it was a parent who always stood by your side, a teacher who believed in you before you believed in yourself, a friend who stayed when everyone else walked away. Their strength wasn't measured by how many people they defeated, it was measured by how many people they lifted up. That's the heart of benevolence. Real strength doesn't make others feel small, it makes them feel secure. Unfortunately, the world often teaches the opposite. It tells us that being powerful means being intimidating, that leadership means control, that winning means someone else has to lose. But the samurai understood something timeless. The strongest person in the room isn't the one everyone fears, it's the one everyone trusts. Because true power never needs to announce itself. It speaks through calmness, through patience, through generosity. Imagine a tree standing in the middle of a storm. It doesn't shout about its strength. It simply offers shelter, shade, protection. Its strength exists not for itself, but for others. Bushido invites us to become like that tree, to use our knowledge to teach, our success to inspire, our influence to encourage, not to satisfy our ego, but to make life a little easier for someone else. And perhaps that's the greatest misunderstanding about kindness. Many people think kindness is weakness, but in reality, it's much easier to lose your temper than to remain patient. It's much easier to seek revenge than to choose forgiveness. It's much easier to think only about yourself than to care for someone else. Compassion isn't weakness. It requires tremendous strength, because before you can be kind to others, you must first learn to master yourself. The samurai knew the greatest victory was never over another person. It was over your own anger, your own pride, your own selfishness. Because when you can control those, no one else can control you. And maybe that's what true strength has always looked like, not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to protect. Because once compassion becomes part of your character, another quality naturally follows. You begin treating every person with dignity, whether they're above you, below you, or standing beside you. And that leads us to the next virtue of Bushido: respect, the quiet power of humility.
Part 5. Respect, the strength of humility. So, if compassion teaches us to care for others, what prevents that compassion from turning into pride? The samurai believed the answer was respect. Not respect that demands admiration, not respect that comes from fear, but respect that begins with humility. Today, many people misunderstand humility. They think it means thinking less of yourself, being quiet, never standing up for your beliefs. But that's not humility, that's insecurity. True humility is something much stronger. It's knowing your worth without needing to prove you're better than anyone else. Think about the people you genuinely admire. They aren't usually the loudest person in the room. They don't constantly remind others of their achievements. They don't need attention to feel important. Instead, they listen, they remain calm, they make other people feel valued. And that's exactly what the samurai admired, because respect wasn't something you earned only from kings or warriors or powerful people. Every person deserved dignity, whether they were rich or poor, young or old, friend or stranger. The samurai believed the way you treat someone who can do nothing for you reveals far more about your character than the way you treat someone powerful. It's easy to be polite to your boss, to a celebrity, to someone you hope will help you. But what about the waiter serving your meal, the cleaner who keeps your workplace tidy, the stranger asking for directions? Respect isn't selective. It's a habit, a reflection of who you are, not who the other person is. Another reason respect mattered so much was because it required self-control. Imagine someone insults you, raises their voice, tries to provoke you. Most people react immediately. They argue, they shout back, they let anger take control. But the samurai asked a different question: who is truly stronger, the person who loses control or the one who remains calm? Bushido teaches that mastering your emotions is far more difficult than mastering a sword, because anyone can react. Very few can respond with wisdom. The modern world often rewards outrage. The loudest opinions spread the fastest. Arguments fill our screens every day. Everyone wants to be heard. Few people want to understand. But respect begins when listening becomes more important than winning. It doesn't mean agreeing with everyone. It simply means recognizing that every person carries struggles you cannot see. Every life has a story. Every mistake has a lesson. Every human being deserves dignity. Perhaps that's why respect creates something that force can never: trust. When people feel respected, they feel safe. When they feel safe, they open their hearts. And when they open their hearts, real relationships begin. The samurai knew a warrior's greatest strength wasn't the sword at his side. It was the character that made others trust the hand holding it. Because respect isn't about appearing powerful. It's about making others feel valued. And when your actions consistently reflect your values, people begin believing something even more important. They begin believing your word. Which brings us to the next virtue of Bushido: honesty and sincerity. The idea that your word should be as reliable as your character. So,
Respect earns people's admiration, but honesty earns something even more valuable: trust. And according to Bushido, trust wasn't something you could buy. It wasn't something you could demand. It had to be earned. One truthful action, one kept promise at a time. The samurai believed something that's difficult to imagine today. A person's word should be stronger than any written contract. If a samurai gave his promise, that promise became his bond. No signature, no witnesses, no legal agreement. His character was enough. Think about how rare that feels today. We make promises so easily. I'll call you tomorrow. I'll be there. I'll start next week. I'll change. The words come naturally, but the actions often never arrive, and little by little, our words begin to lose their meaning. Bushido reminds us that every promise you break doesn't just affect other people, it affects you. Because every time you fail to keep your own word, your mind quietly begins to trust you less. Imagine telling yourself, "I'm going to wake up early." Tomorrow comes, you hit the snooze button. You tell yourself, "I'll exercise," but another excuse appears. No one else notices, but you do. And with every broken promise, you send yourself a silent message: my words don't really matter. Over time, those small moments shape your identity, not because you aren't capable, but because you've stopped believing your own commitments. The samurai understood that discipline begins with honesty, especially honesty with yourself, because it's easy to blame circumstances, to blame bad luck, to blame other people. But real growth begins the moment you ask a harder question: what could I have done differently? That question changes everything, because honesty isn't about being perfect, it's about being truthful enough to improve. Think about the people you trust most. It's probably not because they're perfect, it's because they're consistent. Their actions match their words. When they make a promise, you believe them, not because they say the right things, but because they've proven again and again that they mean them. That's what sincerity really is: living in such a way that your actions speak before your words ever have to. And perhaps that's why trust is so fragile. It takes years to build, yet only a moment to lose. Bushido teaches us that your reputation isn't created by one grand achievement. It's built through hundreds of ordinary moments when nobody is watching. Moments where you quietly choose to tell the truth, to keep your promise, to stay faithful to your values. Because eventually, people stop listening to what you say, and they start believing what you consistently do. But there is one final virtue that ties every lesson together: justice, courage, compassion, respect, honesty. None of them truly matter without one final commitment: the commitment to live with honor and remain loyal to what you believe is right. And that's where Bushido reaches.
Part 7. Honor and Loyalty, the Legacy of a Samurai. We've reached the final virtue of Bushido, and in many ways, it's the one that gives meaning to all the others. Because what good is justice if you abandon it when life becomes difficult? What good is courage if you only show it when it's convenient? What good is honesty if your values change whenever circumstances do? This is where honor and loyalty come together, not as separate ideas, but as the foundation of a life worth remembering. Today, many people confuse honor with reputation, but they're not the same. Your reputation is what other people think about you. Your honor is what you know about yourself. Reputation can change overnight: a rumor, a misunderstanding, a single mistake. But honor lives somewhere much deeper, inside your conscience. It's the quiet voice that asks, did I stay true to my values? Did I keep my word? Did I become someone I can respect? Because at the end of every day,
the opinion that matters most is your own. The samurai understood this. That's why they protected their honor more carefully than their possessions. Because once you lose money, you can earn it back. Once you lose status, you can rebuild it. But once you repeatedly betray your own principles, you slowly begin to lose yourself. Honor wasn't about being perfect. It was about living in a way that allowed you to look in the mirror without regret. And then came loyalty, perhaps one of the most misunderstood virtues today. Loyalty doesn't mean blindly following someone. It doesn't mean accepting what is wrong. True loyalty begins with your principles, your family, your responsibilities, your friends, the promises you've freely chosen to keep. Think about the people you trust most. Why do they matter so much? Not because they were always successful, but because they stayed. When life became difficult, they didn't disappear. When you failed, they didn't judge you. When everyone else walked away, they remained. That's loyalty. The samurai believed anyone can stand beside you when everything is going well. But true character is revealed when staying becomes difficult. And maybe the same is true for us. It's easy to be honest when honesty costs nothing. Easy to be kind when everyone is kind to us. Easy to follow our values when life is comfortable. But Bushido asks something greater. Can you remain the same person even when life tests you? Because in the end, your life won't be remembered for how much you owned or how famous you became. It will be remembered for the kind of person you chose to be, for the promises you kept, the people you protected, the values you refused to compromise, the character you built one decision at a time. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of Bushido. A meaningful life isn't created by extraordinary moments. It's created by ordinary choices made with extraordinary character. But before we leave the world of the samurai, there's one final question we need to answer. What can this centuries-old philosophy teach us today? Because Bushido isn't just a code from the past. It's a guide for anyone who wants to live with purpose in the modern world. And that's exactly what we'll explore next. The 3 greatest lessons of Bushido.
Part 8. The 3 greatest lessons of Bushido. After exploring the 7 virtues of Bushido, a question naturally arises. What was the samurai really trying to teach us? Was Bushido simply a code for warriors, or was it something much deeper? If we had to summarize this entire philosophy into just 3 timeless lessons, these would be them, and perhaps they're more relevant today than they were centuries ago. Lesson 1. Character is greater than success. Take a moment and think about the people you admire most. Is it because they became wealthy? Because they were famous? Because they had power? Maybe, but chances are, what you admire most is who they were, their honesty, their courage, their kindness, their integrity. Success can impress people, but character earns their respect. The modern world often teaches us to focus on what we achieve. Bushido teaches us to focus on who we become, because money can disappear, titles can disappear, even fame fades with time, but character leaves an impact that outlives us. The samurai understood that the greatest victory was never over another person. It was becoming someone you could be proud of. Lesson 2. Discipline creates freedom. At first, that sounds like a contradiction. Most people think discipline takes freedom away. The samurai believed the opposite. Imagine waking up every morning without needing motivation. Imagine keeping your promises even when you don't feel like it. Imagine facing difficulties without immediately giving up. That's what discipline creates. Freedom from excuses, freedom from fear, freedom from becoming a slave to your emotions. The samurai didn't rely on motivation because motivation comes and goes.
They relied on habits, on principles, on doing what needed to be done, whether they felt inspired or not. And perhaps that's one of the greatest lessons for our generation. Your future won't be shaped by your best intentions. It will be shaped by your daily habits. Lesson 3. Your legacy matters more than your achievements. Imagine, it's many years from now. People are remembering your life. They probably won't remember the phone you owned, the car you drove, the number in your bank account. They won't remember how many followers you had, but they'll remember something else. Were you honest? Could your word be trusted? Did you help people or only yourself? Did your presence make others feel stronger or smaller? Bushido reminds us that a meaningful life isn't measured by what we collected. It's measured by what we contributed, by the values we lived, by the people we inspired, by the character we left behind. And perhaps that's why this ancient philosophy still speaks to millions of people today, because deep down, every one of us wants the same thing, not just to be successful, but to live a life that truly mattered. So maybe the samurai's greatest lesson was never about becoming a better warrior, it was about becoming a better human being. And that brings us to our final reflection, because the battlefield may have changed, but the battle itself still continues, every single day, inside each of us. And that's where our journey ends, with one final question: how do we live like a samurai in the modern world?
Part 9. Living like a modern samurai. So, after everything we've explored, the 7 virtues, the timeless lessons, the wisdom of the samurai, one final question remains. What does Bushido actually look like today? After all, most of us will never wear armor, will never carry a katana, will never step onto an ancient battlefield. But perhaps that's because our battles have changed. Today, the enemy isn't standing in front of us, it's living inside us. Every morning, we wake up to a different kind of battlefield, the battle between discipline and procrastination, between honesty and convenience, between courage and fear, between compassion and selfishness, between purpose and distraction. No swords, no armies, just choices. Quiet, ordinary choices that slowly shape the person we're becoming. The samurai understood something remarkable. A person's greatest enemy was never another warrior. It was the weaker version of themselves, the version ruled by anger, by ego, by laziness, by fear, by comfort. And if you think about it, that battle still exists every single day. Every time you choose to keep your word instead of making another excuse, you're practicing Bushido. Every time you stand up for what's right, even when nobody stands beside you, you're practicing Bushido. Every time you stay calm when anger would be easier, you're practicing Bushido. Every time you choose kindness when the world encourages cruelty, you're practicing Bushido. The samurai never expected perfection. They understood something that many of us forget. Character isn't built in one extraordinary moment. It's built in thousands of ordinary ones. A promise kept, a temptation resisted, a difficult conversation faced, a stranger treated with respect, a mistake honestly admitted. Day after day, those small decisions become habits. Those habits become character, and character becomes your legacy. Imagine your life as a sword being forged. Steel doesn't become strong by avoiding fire. It becomes strong because it passes through it, again and again and again. Maybe life's challenges are doing the same thing to you. The failures you've experienced, the disappointments you've carried, the responsibilities you've accepted, the fears you've faced. Perhaps they weren't breaking you. Perhaps they were shaping you. Before we end, I'd like to leave you with one final thought, not something to remember, something to live. Imagine it's many years from now.
your life has become a story. The people who knew you are talking about the kind of person you were. They probably won't remember the car you drove, the clothes you wore, or how much money you made, but they'll remember something far more important. Did your word mean something? Did you treat people with kindness? Did you stand by your principles, even when it was difficult? Did you leave the people around you better than you found them? Because in the end, that is the true spirit of Bushido. Not becoming a legendary warrior, but becoming a person whose character inspires others. A person who quietly chooses integrity when shortcuts are easier. Who chooses courage when fear whispers, wait. Who chooses compassion when the world rewards indifference. Who chooses honor even when nobody's watching. Maybe that's the kind of strength our world needs most. Not louder voices, not sharper opinions, but stronger character. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Bushido, the soul of Japan. And thank you for being part of BookBite. If this journey gave you a new perspective, don't rush to the next video just yet. Sit with these ideas. Ask yourself, which one virtue do I need most in my life right now? And then practice it, not once, but every day. Because books don't change lives. The decisions we make after closing them do. If you enjoy discovering timeless wisdom from the world's greatest books and turning those ideas into practical lessons for everyday life, then BookBite is where those journeys continue. Until next time, live with courage, lead with kindness, stand by your values, and remember, the greatest warrior isn't the one who defeats the most enemies, it's the one who never stops becoming a better human being.